And as usual, we'll begin with some prayers and then a little meditation to generate an especially strong motivation of bodhicitta.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one thus gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you, who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few moments to really settle yourself in the present, the here and now. So then, even if we know that samsara is in the nature of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, we've heard that many times, we've meditated on it, we have some understanding of that, but sometimes we still get captivated by something beautiful, some beautiful place we go to, or some wonderful person, some sense objects. And then we might forget that the nature of all of these things is unsatisfactory, dukkha. Everything in samsara is impermanent, it's changing all the time, and it won't last. So nothing in samsara can give us real, genuine happiness or peace. And there are lots of painful experiences that come to us again and again, without choice, without control. So when thinking about this, we can become despondent, feel despair. But that isn't correct, because there is an alternative to samsara, a state of genuine happiness and peace, freedom from all dukkha and its causes. And Buddha had discovered this state, liberation, nirvana, enlightenment, and he taught the way to get there. And we're really fortunate that we have the chance to learn this way. And there's a key, like a magic key, that unlocks the gate that keeps us trapped in this prison of samsara. And that key is the wisdom understanding emptiness. That's really the only way out. The only way to get out of samsara is by understanding emptiness, the true nature of all things. So that wisdom is what eliminates all the afflictions, especially ignorance about the nature of things. And free of ignorance, free of afflictions, we'll stop creating the karma to continue being born in samsara again and again. And we can really purify our karma completely. So even though it's not easy to understand emptiness, it's important to keep going and not give up. And slowly, slowly, it starts to make more sense. And eventually, we will get that wisdom, that realization. So we're really fortunate that we have this opportunity now to deepen our understanding of emptiness. So let's do this with as much compassion and loving kindness and bodhicitta as we can generate. So before continuing in the text, so there was something in last week's class. I showed a chart of the first 3 paths. And on this chart it said that the entry point for a hearer or a solitary realizer to attain the first path, the path of accumulation, was uncontrived renunciation. And later at some point, Venerable Tarpa asked me about that. I think, if I remember correctly, she said she'd never heard of uncontrived renunciation. And that made me wonder, where did I get that from? Is that correct? And so I was looking through my files, and I found something from Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, a handout she prepared for a class that she taught on the paths and grounds at Tushita in Dharamsala. So in that handout, she says that the criterion for entering the fundamental vehicle path, this is meaning the paths of hearers and solitary realizers, is having a spontaneous and uncontrived awareness that only aspires to attain liberation, i.e. self-liberation. And such an awareness is called renunciation. So I think we can rely on her. She's been spending so many years and years and years studying. She's a geshe and teaching. So yeah, even though it isn't always mentioned in text that it has to be uncontrived renunciation, then I think we can accept that that is correct. Mm-hmm.
In thinking about the definition of path among the 2 paths and grounds, I believe that includes, from ornament, I believe that includes that word uncontrived.
I don't remember. I'd have to look that up.
Okay.
The path. Yeah, usually path is an awareness, a mind. Yeah. And then she says the criterion for entering the universal vehicle, the Mahayana paths, is having generated bodhicitta, a spontaneous and uncontrived awareness that aspires to attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So we know that already, but it was the uncontrived renunciation that was in doubt. So I think we can clear up that doubt. And also I was looking through some material of Pabonka Rinpoche, like Liberation in the Palm of the Hand, and another text where he talks about how to meditate on the Lamrim. And in those writings, he says that we need to generate an uncontrived experience of all the topics in the Lamrim, starting from reliance on a spiritual teacher. And he says we first have to generate a contrived one, like we have to make effort to have that state of mind and then keep going until it becomes uncontrived. And he gives an explanation of what that means, uncontrived. He says an uncontrived realization is, first he's a contrived one. So he says a spiritual awareness that arises after continuous reflection on many scriptural citations and reasonings, but fails to arise without such reflection, is called a contrived experiential realization. So contrived is you have to, reflect on quotations and reasonings and so on to bring it about. And then an uncontrived experiential realization is one that arises distinctly as soon as you bring a subject to mind, and irrespective of any prolonged reflection, like the desire for sense objects that arises in your mind without any need of prolonged contemplation. Okay, so, potato chips or chocolate or whatever, kind of food you like. You don't have to think a lot about, how delicious those things are and how you would like to enjoy them, just like that. It's uncontrived. So in a similar way, we need to get to that point with our understanding of the Lamrim. It needs to arise just like, as soon as we think about it, it's there. And then there was this question the Venerable Chuni asked, and it was also a question I had. If a bodhisattva needs to have uncontrived renunciation before they generate uncontrived bodhicitta and enter the path of accumulation. So I wrote to Geshe Kelsang Wangmo, and I thought she might reply. I've written to her many times in the past, and I don't get a reply. I think she's super busy. But I got a reply. Maybe because it's Losar time, and it's kind of, holiday time, so she's not so busy. Anyway, so she replied, quite a long reply, actually. I won't read all of it, but she says, yes, a bodhisattva develops uncontrived renunciation before uncontrived bodhicitta. And this is because uncontrived bodhicitta must be preceded by uncontrived great compassion. And such compassion is described as a loving attitude that wishes all sentient beings to be free from the three types of suffering. But before such a mind can arise, we must reflect on the disadvantages of the three kinds of suffering in relation to ourselves and cultivate a sincere wish to be free from them. Only on that basis, really seeing clearly how those three types of suffering are awful and we want to be free of them, only on that basis, and having developed a sense of closeness toward all sentient beings through the cultivation of affectionate love, can we then, you don't have to write this down, I can forward it to you, I'm trying to go fast, but yeah, I'll forward the email. So we also have to develop the sense of closeness towards sentient beings through the cultivation of affectionate love. I think that's in the sevenfold cause and effect method that comes after contemplating the kindness of sentient beings and wanting to repay their kindness. And there's a special kind of love. Sometimes it's called heartwarming love, affectionate love. So we need to cultivate that. Only then can we then sincerely wish all beings to be free from these sufferings as an expression of our great compassion. The reasoning here is that even if we have come to feel extremely close to all sentient beings, if we do not genuinely wish to be free from samsaric suffering ourselves, there's no reason to wish for all beings to be free from it. Now, so even if you had love for all sentient beings, but if you didn't have renunciation, then that wouldn't turn into bodhicitta, great compassion bodhicitta. And she gives a quote from Lamrim Chunmo. I won't read that, but here's something else. His Holiness has also said on several occasions that verse 7 of the three principal aspects of the path, that's the one that says, it talks about constantly being swept by the current of the four powerful rivers, that one, yeah. So we should first meditate on that in relation to ourselves in order to generate renunciation, and then in relation to all sentient beings in order to generate great compassion. Many commentators explain in this connection that the focal object of renunciation is oneself, whereas the focal object of great compassion is all sentient beings. And the aspect of these two minds is the same, the wish to be free from the three types of suffering. So that mind is the same, but it's the focal object that's different. In one case, it's just me. In the other case, it's everyone else. So she says, in that sense, moving from renunciation to great compassion involves no change in the aspect of the mind itself, but only a shift in its focal object. So anyway, yeah, I'll forward that to everybody. So yeah, I hope that's clear then. And in terms of our practice, we aspire to become Buddhas, fully enlightened Buddhas, and to do that we have to follow the Bodhisattva path, the Mahayana path. And to follow that path we have to develop renunciation, which could also be called compassion for yourself, right? Venerable has said this, and I think it's true as well, even though it's not usually mentioned, it's not called that in the text. But if you think about it, it is compassion, self-compassion, the best, highest form of self-compassion, getting yourself out of every kind of suffering and cause of suffering forever. So we have to cultivate that first in an uncontrived, effortless way, and then we can turn our attention to others and have that same attitude towards them. I mean, it won't be instant. We also have to, affectionate love for all living beings and compassion for all living beings. But yeah, bringing all those things together, then that will lead to bodhicitta. That clear, everyone? So then, carrying on. So last time we left off on page 333. This was in a section called The Prerequisites for Special Insight. And so in that section we looked at which texts we should rely on. And Lama Tsongkhapa says we should rely on the sutras of definitive meaning, which are those that explain emptiness. And he also said which commentators to rely on. Because, the sutras, especially, I think the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, they're really hard to understand. If you just read them, what is no eye, no ear, no nose? What? So we need, wise masters who understand the meaning to write commentaries and rely on their commentaries. And so Lama Tsongkhapa said we should rely on Nagarjuna and Aryadeva. Those two are called Madhyamikas of the original text. And then he went on to explain, after them, then there were like divisions of Madhyamikas. And he explained some incorrect ways of dividing the Madhyamikas that were fabricated, formulated by previous Tibetan masters. Those were said to be a presentation that only impresses idiots. So we don't want to follow that one. Then he went on to talk about the main division is into the Prasangika and Svatantrika, and sometimes those are translated into English. I just got used to saying the Sanskrit, so I always use that. But Prasangika are called consequentialists, and then Svatantrika are the autonomists. And that division has to do with how they explain you generate the view that ascertains emptiness. So that'll probably come later in the text. There's differences in the way they explain that. So the next part, just one paragraph left, page 333, middle of the page. So he's going to explain which of these divisions he followed in his writings. Okay, so it says, yet who did those masters follow to seek the intentions of the noble father and his spiritual son? those masters, I think, refers to just above, in the middle of the above paragraph, it talks about the scholars of the later propagation of teachings in the land of snowy mountains created two designations, Svatantrika and Prasangika. So I think he's referring to those scholars. So who did they follow in order to seek the intentions of Nagarjuna and, oh, maybe not. Take the intention. Anyway, I don't know, but anyway. Yeah, because he says, then the past gurus of these instructions held to this system as the main one by following the great elder Atisha. Yeah, so that's talking about the masters in Tibet. And I think it's the Kadampa masters, the Kadampa who were followers of Atisha. And he made Master Chandrakirti's system the main Madhyamaka system. So Atisha followed Chandrakirti. Master Chandrakirti saw that among the commentators on the fundamental treatise on the middle way, so that's Nagarjuna's text where he mainly laid out the Madhyamika view. So Chandrakirti saw that among the commentators of that, there were lots of people who wrote commentaries on Nagarjuna. Buddha Palita had completely elucidated the Noble One's intentions. So Buddha Palita got it right. Others didn't. So Chandrakirti followed Buddha Palita. So he, meaning Chandrakirti, elucidated the Noble One's, Nagarjuna's, intentions, basing himself on Buddha Palita's system. He also took many good explanations from Master Bhava Viveka. So he was another commentator to Nagarjuna, but he got some things not quite right according to our system, refuting those that seemed slightly incorrect. Since the commentaries by Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti are seen to be very outstanding with regard to explaining the texts of the noble father Nagarjuna and his spiritual son Arideva, their intentions will be determined here, following in the footsteps of the former two masters. So basically, he's just saying himself, in writing like this text, is following Chandrakirti and Buddha Palita, who wrote commentaries to Nagarjuna. Because even if you read Nagarjuna, I mean, he was commentating on the sutras, like the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, but it's very hard to understand Nagarjuna if you just read his words. So you need commentaries to him. So, and then if you read Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti, they're also hard to understand. So we need Lama Tsongkhapa. And even Lama Tsongkhapa is sometimes very hard to understand. So I think in the monasteries, they have their own textbooks written by Tibetan masters to kind of elucidate, bring out, clarify the meaning of these texts. Okay, so then next point is how to determine the view in particular. This has 3 points: identifying afflicted ignorance, demonstrating that it is the root of revolving and cyclic existence, and the need to seek the view of selflessness if you wish to eliminate the apprehension of a self. So all these will take a number of pages. So first, identifying afflicted ignorance. So, yeah, this term ignorance can be kind of confusing. And I was really grateful when Volume 3 came out, Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha Nature, because there it goes through the 6 root afflictions, and one of those is called ignorance. But there's actually different kinds of ignorance. I was really glad. I've never seen that before, a list of the different ways that that term is used. Yeah. And otherwise, it's like, the word ignorance can refer to different things, different mental states. And if they just use ignorance without clarifying which kind of ignorance they're talking about, it can be quite confusing. But here, what he's talking about is the ignorance that is the root of samsara, the one that keeps us stuck in samsara. That's the most important one we need to know about so that we can get rid of it and free ourselves from samsara. And also, if you notice, it says afflicted ignorance. So then, does that mean there's ignorance that's not afflicted? And that term does come up sometimes. I don't know if it comes up. I didn't see it in this section, but it does come up sometimes. And so I looked for an explanation of that, and Geshe Sopa said, yeah, there is a term that's sometimes used in the scriptures, non-afflicted ignorance. But non-afflicted ignorance is actually not ignorance. It's not a mental state, but it's the imprints left by ignorance, that, like the cognitive obscurations or obscurations to omniscience, the things that prevent us from getting enlightened. So those are sometimes called non-afflicted ignorance, but strictly speaking, it's not ignorance. So whenever ignorance is a mental state, then it's afflicted. Not always non-virtuous, though, because when we create virtue, when we do virtuous action, our mind is affected by ignorance, but that ignorance would not be non-virtuous. It's afflicted, it's an affliction. We don't see things correctly, but it isn't non-virtuous. So ignorance isn't always non-virtuous. That's important to understand. Otherwise, can lead to some confusion. Okay. Among the antidotes taught by the victor, the Buddha, those countering the mental afflictions of attachment and the like are partial antidotes, whereas the antidote to ignorance, he taught, is an antidote to all of them. Therefore, ignorance is the basis of all errors and faults. Clear words, this is a commentary by Chandrakirti to Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom. So that says, the 9 divisions of the Buddha's teachings based on the two truths, such as the sets of sutras, are perfectly proclaimed to meet the extensive behaviors of worldly beings. Among them, those taught in order to remove attachment will not eliminate hatred. Okay, what would be an example of a method to remove attachment? Yeah, what's another one? Ugliness. Right, so the unattractiveness or foulness of like the body and other sense objects. So if you meditate on that, it helps remove attachment. Well, it doesn't completely get rid of attachment, but at least it subdues, tames attachment. But will it eliminate hatred? Will it? No. It'll probably increase hatred. Yeah, my enemy is really ugly. And then he said, those taught in order to remove hatred will not eliminate attachment. So what's an antidote to hatred? Love. So if you meditate on love, will that help you remove attachment? Yeah, might increase. So each of the afflictions has specific antidotes that work against them and help to subdue them. And those taught in order to exhaust pride will not overcome the other defilements. Therefore, they are not so pervasive. All those discourses are not of such great import. I mean, of course they are important. We do have to know how to reduce our afflictions. But, and he says, those that were taught for the sake of exhausting ignorance, however, overcome all the mental afflictions. The victors taught that all the mental afflictions are thoroughly based on ignorance. So all our afflictions, our attachment, our anger, our pride, jealousy, and so on, they're all based on ignorance about the true nature of things. So if we can get at that, we can, attack ignorance, then we will overcome all the other afflictions. That being so, you must meditate on suchness, that's another synonym of emptiness, as the antidote to ignorance. Moreover, unless you have identified ignorance, you will not know how to cultivate its antidote. So it's also important to understand ignorance. What is it? What is this ignorance we're trying to overcome? Therefore, it is extremely important to identify ignorance. Sorry. So ignorance, and there's different terms for ignorance. This one is marigpa, or avidya, and that term itself means not knowing. Rigpa means knowing, and then marigpa, not knowing. So literally, what we're talking about here is not knowing. So ignorance is the opposite of knowledge. But this knowledge, rigpa, should not be understood as just any knowledge. Yeah, so like the history of Brazil. I'm very ignorant about that. But that not knowing the history of Brazil isn't what we're talking about here. There's lots of things we don't know, but those kinds of ignorances are not the important one. Rather, this, in talking about knowledge, the knowledge we need to get, rather it is the wisdom knowing the suchness of selflessness. This translation I don't think is so good. The wisdom knowing the suchness which is selflessness. Because otherwise it sounds like the suchness of selflessness, and that's like the emptiness of emptiness. Which is true. I mean, there is such a thing as emptiness of emptiness, but that's not the only thing we're talking about here. We're talking about the emptiness of all phenomena. So I think it's, Jeffrey's translation just said suchness, selflessness. So anyway, the point is, it's the wisdom that knows suchness or knows selflessness, because those terms are actually synonymous. Its opposite cannot be merely absence of that wisdom. Okay, so the opposite of knowing suchness isn't simply not knowing, like just a simple unawareness, or merely something else, some other kind of state of mind. It must be its antagonist, like it's just directly opposite. Or ignorance is something that's directly opposite to the wisdom knowing selflessness. And then he goes on to clarify, it is the superimposition of a self, and more specifically, the two superimpositions of a self, of phenomena, and of persons. So where he says self here, you've probably heard this before, but the term self, it's crazy in a way. It can mean so many different things, like ignorance. So the term self sometimes refers to like a personal self, myself, yourself, but it can also refer to the object of negation, inherent existence, according to Prasangika. So here, in this sentence, self, the term self is, it means inherent existence. So superimposition of inherent existence, like projecting inherent existence onto things. That's the meaning of ignorance. Ignorance kind of projects inherent existence onto things that are in fact empty of inherent existence. They don't have inherent existence, but ignorance puts inherent existence there. So things appear inherently existing, and then we just kind of go along with that. And then there's like two divisions of that: self of phenomena and self of person. So persons would be living beings like us, animals, hungry ghosts, gods, and phenomena. So phenomena, usually the term phenomena refers to anything, everything that exists. But in this context, it's anything that isn't a person. So all phenomena, all existence that aren't persons are in phenomena. So they always talk about the two kinds of selflessness: selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena, which are opposite to believing there is a self, inherent existence in persons and in phenomena. That makes sense? So both the apprehension of a self of phenomena and the apprehension of a self of persons are ignorance. So that's the ignorance we're talking about here. Grasping inherent existence with phenomena and grasping inherent existence with persons. The manner of superimposition is to apprehend that phenomena exist established by way of their intrinsic nature, by way of their intrinsic characteristics, or inherently. So these are some of the synonyms for inherent existence. What he translates here is by way of their intrinsic nature is what we usually call from its own side. Things existing from their own side, as if they're over there telling us, speaking to us, I exist, I am real, I don't depend on anything else. So that's how they appear, but that's not true. In this regard, the Questions of Upali Sutra says that phenomena are posited by the power of conceptuality. The various flowers that gladden the mind, the golden, resplendent, attractive mansions, both completely lack a creator. They are posited by conceptuality. The world is imputed by conceptuality. It actually, in the Tibetan, it says, the world is imputed through the power of conceptuality. 60 stanzas of reasoning, that's Nagarjuna, also says, since the perfect Buddha said the world had ignorance as its cause, how could it be invalid to say that this world is due to conceptuality? How could it be, did I say valid? Invalid. How could it be invalid to say this world is due to conceptuality? The commentary on the meaning of this statement explains that the worlds are not established by way of their intrinsic natures from their own side independently, but are merely imputed by conceptuality. 400 stanzas also says, that's Aryadeva's commentary, if without conceptuality, desire and so forth do not exist, what intelligent person would uphold both intrinsic reality and conceptuality? I like Jeffrey's translation of this last line, which is, what intelligent person would uphold that these are real objects and also conceptual. So it just doesn't make sense to say that things are dependent on conception, but they're also real, inherently existing from their own side. That doesn't make sense. And Chandrakirti's commentary on this says, things that exist only through the existence of conceptuality and do not exist without conceptuality are, like a snake imputed to a rope, undoubtedly not established by way of their intrinsic nature or from their own side. So if something exists just due to conceptuality, by the power of conceptuality, and don't exist without such conceptuality, then it's like imputing snake to a rope. That wonderful example. Seeing a rope and it's kind of dark and you don't see very well. You think there's a snake there. So snake is just imputed by the mind. There's no snake there at all. But you think there's a snake. Your mind says there's a snake. And then you get all scared and worried and whatever. So things that exist that way are not established from their own side. This statement explains that in terms of being imputed, I crossed that out because look at Jeffrey's translation, I think. Here it says, being imputed and not established by way of their intrinsic natures, attachment and so forth are like a snake imputed to a rope. So the way Jeffrey translated that sentence is, this statement explains that in terms of being imputed to be established by way of their intrinsic natures, although they are not, attachment and so forth are like a snake imputed to a rope. So things are imputed to be existing from their own side, inherently existing, even though they are not. So in that sense, attachment is like a snake imputed to a rope. So attachment, it seems to be something real, existing from its own side, but in fact it is just imputed by the mind, similar to when the mind imputes snake onto a rope. Doesn't mean they don't exist, they just don't exist the way they appear, the way we see them. Yet the latter is unlike attachment and so forth in terms of whether they conventionally exist, meaning that it isn't exactly the same to say, calling a rope a snake and calling attachment inherently existing, in that, the snake conventionally, there is no snake on that rope, whereas conventionally attachment does exist. A rope snake doesn't exist. Right? A snake as a rope doesn't exist at all conventionally, but attachment does exist. That's one of our big problems we have to deal with. So just saying, oh, it doesn't exist, that's not going to help. It won't go away. So anyway, things are just imputed by conception. For those reasons, the manner of apprehending things as truly existent, which is to be negated, that's the object of negation, true existence. This is another synonym, true existence, another synonym of inherent existence. So the manner of apprehending things as truly existing is to apprehend them not as posited by the power of beginningless conceptuality, but as established by way of their own, by way of their intrinsic natures on top of objects. On top of objects. It does say that, actually. Yul Tengdu. But what did Jeffrey? Just objective. Yeah, he translated that as objectively by way of their own entity. So this is how ignorance conceives things, that they're not posited by the power of conceptuality, but they exist objectively by way of their own nature, their own entity. They seem to exist from their own side, not merely imputed by conception. And this is this is a mind that thinks that way, a consciousness that thinks that way, and it says its conceived object is called self or inherent existence. So the conceived object, I don't know if you've studied this, but they talk about all these different kinds of objects. It's crazy. I always have to look it up. Conceived object is actually the object the mind engages in, but it's only for conception. So only when you have a conceptual mind, not a direct perception, but a conceptual mind has a conceived object, and that's simply the object the mind is engaging with, like a snake or a rope or a person. So it's the main object that's being dealt with. And in the case of this ignorance, its conceived object is called self or inherent existence. So it's actually dealing with something that doesn't exist, an inherently existing I, an inherently existing enemy, an inherently existing car, and so on. So that's the conceived object of that mind, that ignorance. And that doesn't even exist. A person exists, a car exists, but an inherently existing person, an inherently existing car, those don't exist. So that's like wrong consciousness. The selflessness of a person is taught as the non-existence of this, meaning inherent existence, with a person as the basis for the attribute. So that means when you have a person, like Venerable Pema, with her as the attribute, then thinking of her as inherently existent, like inherently existing Venerable Pema is actually non-existent, okay? There's no such thing as an inherently existing Venerable Pema. And that's an example of selflessness of persons. Selflessness of persons is the non-existence of that false object that our mind is superimposing, projecting. That's the meaning of selflessness of persons. And the selflessness of phenomena is taught as the non-existence of this with a phenomenon such as an eye or a nose as the basis. Okay, so our nose, my nose, yeah, doesn't exist inherently, independently, though it appears to. So the lack of, the absence of an inherently existing nose would be an example of selflessness of phenomena. But anything else, a car, a hamburger, a tree, okay? Any phenomena that isn't a person. So selflessness of phenomena would be the absence of inherently existing whatever with regard to anything that's not a person. Therefore, the apprehension of that inherent existence as present in persons and phenomena is implicitly understood as the apprehension of the two selves, and meaning two selves here, two types of inherent existence. Two types of inherent existence that our mind superimposes and believes in. One with regard to persons and one with regard to everything else. Then commentary on 400 stanzas. This is also Chandrakirti, says, in this regard, the so-called self is an essence of things that does not depend on anything else. Its non-existence is selflessness. Owing to the division of phenomena and persons, it is understood as twofold, a selflessness of phenomena and a selflessness of persons. So an essence of things, another way of saying inherent existence, that's the meaning of self. And its non-existence is selflessness. And with the division of persons and phenomena, then we can talk about selflessness of phenomena and selflessness of persons. It is like that. So just to take an aside here, could put the slides up. So this is from the Lamrim Chenmo, the great treatise on the stages of the path. Volume 3, page numbers are there. He might talk about it later in this text, but I don't know. But I found this really interesting because, we often talk about the object of negation. And the object of negation, we have to recognize the object of negation, like the inherently existing I, or inherently existing person and someone else, inherently existing car. But usually we start with the I. We have to look for the inherently existing I, identify that, and then refute that with reasoning. So they always talk about the object of negation. So there's this explanation of two kinds of objects of negation. And I learned about this in the ornament class as well. So one is objects negated by the path. These exist. And they include the two kinds of obscurations, afflictive obscurations, knowledge obscurations, right? These are eliminated by meditating on selflessness, emptiness. So you've heard about these obscurations we have to get rid of. They stand in the way of our attainment of liberation and enlightenment. So we have to overcome them. And so they are objects of negation. They're objects to be negated, to be refuted, to be eliminated. And they exist. They do exist. Yeah. Whereas the second type of object of negation is called objects negated by reason. For example, an inherently existing I. These objects of negation do not exist, although they appear to wrong consciousnesses. And they are refuted by reasons like dependent arising. So there's objects of negation that don't exist. That's the one we normally talk about, like the inherently existing I. That doesn't exist at all. It's complete fabrication, complete, hallucination. That doesn't exist at all. And so we use reason to eliminate that one. But then there's also objects of negation that do exist. And these are the minds, like ignorance, best example. Ignorance, that does exist. That's a consciousness that believes in inherent existence, that wrongly believes that things exist inherently. Okay, so things don't exist inherently, we refute that. But that consciousness is there in our minds. We do have that. And that needs to be eliminated, negated, refuted. So, so Lama Tsongkhapa bases this explanation on a text by Nagarjuna called Refutation of Objections. And he says that the main object of negation is the second one, the one like inherent existence, because in order to stop an inaccurate consciousness, like the first one, you have to first refute the object which that consciousness apprehends. Right? So, so that's the main one. The second one is the main one we have to deal with. We have to recognize inherent existence in our experience, how we see things as inherently existing. We have this consciousness that does exist, believing in inherent existence, which doesn't exist. But to get rid of that consciousness, to stop that ignorance from coming up again and again and again, we have to refute its object. We have to prove to ourselves that that object doesn't exist. It's totally non-existent. Like, for example, a little kid who thinks there's a boogeyman under the bed. So mom turns out the light, leaves, and the kid is terrified because the boogeyman is under the bed and the boogeyman is going to come out and get him. So he can't go to sleep and he's terrified. He's crying. And so the mom comes in and says, no, there's no boogeyman under the bed. Let's get a really good flashlight and look. So you get this flashlight and you shine every part under the bed. There's no place that there's a boogeyman. And so hopefully the kid will be convinced of this, that they can see, oh, there's no boogeyman there. And then they'll relax and go to sleep. So you have to investigate that wrong consciousness that believes in the boogeyman or believes in inherent existence. You have to check, is inherent existence really there? Is it true? Does it really exist? You look in every possible corner, every possible place where it could exist. If you don't find it, then hopefully then you'll be convinced, oh, it doesn't exist. And then you stop that consciousness from coming up and taking over your mind and your life and keeping you in samsara. So, yeah, I just found that helpful, to understand we do have a consciousness that believes in inherent existence, but inherent existence doesn't exist. And we have to prove that to ourselves. We have to become convinced of that in order for that consciousness to stop. So it's not enough just to go into blank-minded meditation. Yeah, just don't think about anything. Keep your mind totally blank. That isn't going to stop that ignorance. Yeah? It just gets suppressed temporarily, but it doesn't go away. And developing calm abiding also. When you're in a state of calm abiding, shamatha, serenity, or you're very peaceful and blissful, and you probably don't have ignorance coming up strongly, but it's still there. It comes up in between meditation time. So just with shamatha, you're not going to get rid of it. So there's no remedy, no way to get rid of that ignorance, to stop it coming up, except by realizing that the object that you're perceiving and you think is real doesn't exist, totally non-existent. Then you need to use reasoning for that. Anyway, I found that helpful, so I wanted to share that. He might talk about it later in the text, but okay. Then he says, with respect to the observed object of the apprehension of a self of person. So the observed object, another of those objects, this is just what the mind is observing, focusing on. Entering the Middle Way explains that some sammitiyas, this is one of the old Buddhist schools in the early days, probably doesn't exist anymore. Some of them assert all the five aggregates. So they say, what is it when you have that ignorance, believing in an inherently existing I? What is the observed object of that? What is the mind looking at, focusing on, and having that view? Does that make sense? It's not like you're just imagining it in space, but there's something the mind is focusing on and then seeing it incorrectly, misapprehending it. So what is that thing the mind is focusing on? So there's different schools, different assertions by different schools. So some of that group assert all five aggregates. All the five aggregates are the observed object. Some assert only the mind to be the basis or observed object of the view of self. Just the mind and not all five aggregates. And I think because the mind, it's only the mind that goes from life to life. The other aggregates, well, at least the body doesn't go. So thinking of a self as something that goes from life to life, then it makes more sense that it's the mind. As for the mind, again, Chittamatrans and certain Madhyamikas who assert a foundational consciousness assert that the foundational consciousness is the observed object, the alaya vijnana. But this sentence is interesting because he says, okay, Chittamatrans definitely assert that there is that kind of mind, alaya vijnana. But then he says certain madhyamikas. So in Jeffrey's translation, he has a footnote that says, well, okay, so let's look at that. Madhyamikas, are there any madhyamikas who assert a foundational consciousness? We have different madhyamikas. We have the prasangikas. Do they say there's a foundational consciousness? No way. Chandrakirti spends a lot of time just tearing that to pieces. Then there's the other ones, the Svatantrikas, and there's two of those. There's the Svatantrikas. Do they say there's a foundational consciousness? No. What about the other one? The Yogacara? Maybe. But they don't. What I've learned is, when we studied ornament, because the ornament for clear realization is written according to that school, the Yogacara, Svatantrika, Madhyamikas, and they don't assert. No. Well, so anyway, Jeffrey's footnote says, later Gelugpa scholars uniformly say that even the yogic autonomy middle way school does not assert a mind basis of all, but instead asserts a subtle form of the mental consciousness as this object, this observed object. Hence, Lama Tsongkhapa's reference here to proponents of the middle, or madhyamikas, who assert a mind basis of all, foundational consciousness, is unclear, unless it is to just such a mental consciousness. Yeah, so later Gelugpa scholars agree that, none of the madhyamikas assert a foundational consciousness. However, you may have noticed, I have noticed, not that I read a lot of other books, but it seems like Kagyu, in the Kagyu tradition, some of those teachers teach 8 consciousnesses, like Chogyam Trungpa. Yeah. Pema Chodron? Who? Jetsuma Tenzin talks about, Yeah, so I'm always, where did they get that? If they're prasangikas? Well, I did read something. It didn't stick in my mind, but in Alex's website, Study Buddhism, he talks about how, we just learned the Gelugpa system, and then we just kind of assume everybody else agrees. But apparently the other schools do have other systems, other ways of explaining things like the madhyamikas and what they believe and the divisions of the madhyamikas and so on. I don't remember all of it, and it's often difficult with the language he uses, the terminology. But it does seem that, and if you go to other schools, maybe Nyingma as well, and Kagyu, then you will find them talking about foundation consciousness. Anyway, it's not a important point here, but here he's just trying to make the point of how, when it comes to pointing out what is the observed object for this mind that believes in inherent existence, what is it focusing on? Some say it's the foundational consciousness, the alaya vijnana. And then some madhyamikas who do not assert a foundation consciousness, such as Bhava Viveka, and many Shravaka schools assert that the observed object is the mental consciousness. Just not the 5 consciousnesses, but the mental consciousness, because again, that's the main thing that goes from one life to the next. However, with these systems, when it comes to the meaning invested in the term person, the one cultivating the paths, the one revolving in cyclic existence, and so forth. Okay, so, when we talk about selflessness, we're not saying there is no person at all. There is someone who's in cyclic existence and experiencing suffering, wants to get out, wants to get to nirvana, and so on. So there is a person doing those things. you need to distinguish these two modes, positing a mere I and positing something like a foundational consciousness as the basis of that I's characteristics. So, so here he's saying that, yeah, you do have to point to something, which is the basis of characteristic. That's what's sometimes translated as illustration. Yeah, they often talk about the illustration of the person. So it's basis of characteristics. I always had trouble with that term, I have to say. I noticed in Geshe Kelsang Wangmo's text, she calls it the mode of existence of the person. The mode of existence of a person. What is that person who is revolving in samsara and trying to get out and eventually reaches enlightenment? What is that? What is the mode of existence? So he's saying here, either there's two modes. One is positing a mere I. That's prasangika. Prasangika is saying, what is that person? I guess another way of saying it would be the conventional person. What is the conventionally existent person? The person that does exist. So prasangikas say it's the mere I, and the others, everybody else, will posit something like foundational consciousness, mental consciousness, aggregates. So the other schools have something within the aggregates, within the body and mind, something they point to and say, oh, that's the person. That is the person that revolves in cyclic existence and gets out. But our school, Prasangika, says, mere I. We'll get more about that later. Okay, now he's going to start talking about the view of the transitory collection. So just maybe before, this is, what's Venerable's term for this? View of a personal identity? View of a personal identity? There's different translations, and this is Jeffries and many other people use view of the transitory collection. And I like to use the term jigta because it's so short, 2 syllables, and all the others are so long, such a mouthful. View of the transitory collection, view of a personal identity, view of the perishable aggregates. I mean, so many syllables. And you want to be fast. So Tibetans just call it jigta. That's like an abbreviation of the Tibetan term. So I might say that sometimes. Anyway, so this is quite a complicated topic. And so, yeah, you probably went through it when you went through volume 3, because it's one of the wrong views when you go through the 6 root afflictions. The last one is views, and that has 5 divisions. One of those is the view of the transitory collection, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it's complicated and takes time to figure it out. But basically, simply speaking, it's just our own sense of self, I, believing there's a real, inherently existing I, okay? That's what it's about. I mean, it's not so simple, of course, but there's so many words used, but it's basically that, our own wrong view about ourself, the deepest one, the subtlest one. We have lots of wrong views about ourselves, but this is the root, the main one that we have to overcome. And it's said to be the root of samsara. It's the root of samsara, the root of all dukkha, all suffering. So here's a definition. This is from volume 3, actually. And this is according to Prasangika, because the other schools will have different ways of explaining it. But according to Prasangika, it's a corrupt intelligence, or sometimes they call it a corrupt wisdom, because it's actually sherab. It's the mental factor of wisdom or intelligence. But it's a diluted one, a corrupt one. And it observes the nominally existent I or mine and grasps it to exist inherently. So nominally existent is just like, yeah, the mere I, another way of saying the mere I, the merely labeled, merely imputed I. So it refers to that, it observes that, and then grasps it to exist inherently. So it's like the rope and the snake, you know. There is an I, the mere I, like the rope. And then this mind looks at the mere I and thinks it's inherently existing, like thinking the rope is a snake. So it it is conception. It's a misconception. And why it's a little complicated is because other schools, other than Prasangika, say that this mind, this Jigta, observes aggregates. And there are actually in the scriptures, there's statements like that this view of the transitory collection observes the aggregates, and then believes that believes there's an inherently existing I. So Chandrakirti disagreed with that because he said if this mind observes the aggregates, then it would be self-grasping of phenomena and not self-grasping of persons. And it's supposed to be a self-grasping of persons. And so he's the one who said that the observed object is the mere I, the nominally existent I, conventionally existent I, or mine. The I that's merely labeled independence on the aggregates. So that does exist, the nominally existent I does exist, but inherently existing I doesn't. So that's basically what this mind is all about, according to our school. And then the second point is it's a type of self-grasping of persons, but only with respect to one's own I or mine. And so it's only about your own view of yourself. So when you grasp somebody else, when I grasp Venerable Manlam as inherently existing, that isn't this one. It's only our own self. And then they say there's two divisions of it, grasping the I as inherently existing. So I is the person, me, my sense of self. And then the mine. And there's a lot of discussion about what is the mine or my. One way of saying it's a sense of minus. It's when the I is in the role of ownership. When we have a sense of I in relation to my computer. Okay, I'm the owner of my computer. So it isn't the computer, it isn't about the computer, because that would be self-grasping of phenomena. If I grasp at my computer as inherently existing, that's self-grasping of phenomena. But there's a sense of an I, a me, who is the owner of that computer, or the owner of our body, our eyes, our ears, and so on, our clothes, our shoes. So it's the I when it's in relation to something we own, something we identify as mine. So that's how that's explained. So seeing that I, the owner, as inherently existing. I'll just read something from Geshe Zopa. He calls it the egotistic view, good one, and the view of the perishable collections. So he says, it holds the opposite of what its name suggests. It does not hold its object to be a perishable collection. See, the reason it's called transitory collection or perishable collection, jigtsok, this is referring to the aggregates, and they are changing all the time, impermanent, every single moment. There's nothing within our body and our mind that stays the same. It's always the same from one moment to the next. It's constantly changing. So there's this mass of all these physical and mental components that are constantly changing. And then we, view that and believe there's some kind of real permanent I within all of that. Yeah, so he says, this view does not hold its object to be a perishable collection. Somewhere within our aggregates, which are in fact transitory, we think there is an absolute controller that owns them. We identify this as I or me existing from its own side. The mind that identifies it in this way is the egotistic view, the view of the perishable collection. This mind is the opposite of the correct view, which understands the self to be dependently imputed on the aggregates. So the I that does exist is just imputed on the aggregates, not a real thing within them. But our innate self-grasping mind does not think of the self as merely imputed on its parts. Instead, to our natural way of thinking, our I seems to be a unity, something single with its own identity. When we say my eyes, my body, and so on, we feel that there is one thing, me, to which these things belong in an objectively established sense. We feel like there's a real owner of our body and our things and so on. And our thoughts, my feelings, right? And he goes on to talk about how we've been habituated to this way of seeing things in all our past lives. So it's deeply rooted, and it's the source of all our daily frustrations. Like wanting to be better than others, feeling jealous of those who are better than us, and so on and so on. So anytime we get frustrated, unhappy, then at the root of that is this mind. And it contaminates our thoughts and our actions such that we keep creating the causes to be reborn in samsara again and again and again and again and again. So this is the root of being in samsara, the root of all our suffering and problems. So, I don't know, we have just 5 minutes left. I could read the next paragraph, or if there's a question.
Couple of questions online. Someone asked, how do we use the 4 establishments of mindfulness to unlock the 2 selfishnesses or the 2 selflessnesses? That was one question. And then from the same person asking, does our looking for emptiness change the object of negation by looking for it? So does looking for emptiness change the object of negation?
Wait a minute, let me do the first one at
Okay.
a time. It's so with regard to the first one, that's a huge topic, and that's in volume 4. So in volume 4, I don't know where Venerable is up to now, but anyway, eventually she'll get to the section on the 37 harmonies with enlightenment, and the first 4 of those are the 4 mindfulnesses. And that text, that book includes both from the Theravada tradition, also from our tradition. So it does, within there's points where you can use the 4 establishments of mindfulness to understand emptiness. With the body or with the mind, just trying to recognize the sense of self. But yeah, we have other ways in our tradition, other ways of getting at the overcoming ignorance and realizing emptiness. So not so much that. But yeah, if you're interested in that, you can read that last few chapters of volume 4. What was the second question?
Does looking for emptiness change the object of negation by looking for it?
We don't look for emptiness. It isn't that we look for emptiness. The way we usually do it is we look for the object of negation. We first have to identify. We have to look within our experience and try to identify this sense of an inherently existing self. It's not easy because it's very sneaky. It's very slippery. It's very sly. It's like when we're not looking, it comes out and messes things up, makes us angry. We get angry and jealous and greedy and all these afflictions. But then when we say, oh, what is that I that's behind all of this? It kind of vanishes. It's very hard to find. And so they say you really have to, I think you have to have quite a calm mind. I've read advice about yogis, yogis in retreat and how they have to spend like maybe a year, even in retreat, to be able to identify the object of negation. So there's a lot of information about that. That'll come later. How to identify the object of negation. Once we've got a clear picture of that, then we use reasoning to prove to ourselves that it's impossible. It's something that simply cannot exist. It's impossible to exist. Like the boogeyman under the bed, or like mirage, when you have a mirage. Water, yeah. We see water over there, but in fact there's not a drop of water. It's totally dry. So what we're trying to do is prove to ourselves that that seemingly real, inherently existing I isn't really there. It doesn't exist. And then when we've succeeded in doing that, that takes time and effort. When you realize, oh, it doesn't exist, it's impossible, then you realize emptiness. So it's not really you're looking for emptiness, but it is the conclusion that you come to after this process of recognizing and refuting the false I, the object of negation. Is that, yeah.
And Venerable Tsongkhapa is asking, is the mere I a person? Thus is mine a person?
Yeah, they do say, according to Prasangika, yeah, a person who, when you try to figure out what is a person, the conventionally existing person, they would say it's the mere I. It's the I that is merely labeled, merely imputed, merely designated in relation to aggregates. I mean, you have to have a set of aggregates. You can't just say person over here in the empty space, or that lamp is a person. So you have to have a suitable basis, a set of aggregates. And then, yeah, the I or person that is labeled, imputed, designated in relation to those aggregates. So that, yeah, the mere I is the person. And then the mind, I think, is also a person. I was reading something about that it's the person who's the owner. I mean, it's basically the same person. It's not a different person than the I, but it's in a certain situation when there's the sense of ownership. That's how I understand it. When I feel my body, my mind, my feelings, my computer. So at that time there's, the I in a certain role, a certain situation. So that it's also a person. Yeah. Well, I didn't get too far in the text today. Well, this material is very difficult, and even the terminology, just the words. So I didn't want to just read the text and leave people wondering what is going on, falling asleep. Okay, so we'll stop there for today and dedicate.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Losang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of White Tara, and that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase.